Hello everyone, it's the Storyteller here. I've prepared something slow, eerie, and sleep-friendly for you tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Are you drifting off already, or still wide awake? Bad reflections. I am not a well person. That isn't easy to admit, even though I understand that it is important to acknowledge that as fact. I am convinced that it all started the night of the storm. After the lightning strike and subsequent power surge from the night before, both washing machines at my apartment complex were on the fritz. It was a minor miracle that we had lost power for only a few minutes, and thank God my expensive surge suppressors did their job. As a combined freelance writer/web designer, I rely heavily on my computers for my livelihood, and imagining even one of them electrically fried just makes my cringe. The electric shock that knocked me on my ass was the real highlight of the evening, though. Strong summer evening thunderstorms were nothing new for our small Midwestern city, but this one was particularly impressive. Blinding flashes lit the windows, and booming thunder rolled and rattled the panes every few minutes. Not wanting to rely on the surge devices exclusively, I decided to quit working and power all my equipment down. Reaching down and unplugging the main computer power feed at the critical moment when the lightning-induced surge came through, I actually saw as well as felt the arc as it jumped from the wall outlet, first following the cord, then my hand as I pulled the plug out. It was quite a jolt, knocked me back a few feet and flat onto my back. I don't think I lost consciousness, but my whole body tingled and I smelled an ozone smell for hours afterward. Probably should have gone to the doctor just to get checked, but I'm mid-20s and still have some lingering adolescent male invincibility delusions, so I figured I'd survive and blew it off. Lugging dirty laundry down to the basement had never been one of my favorite pastimes, but add carting it a few blocks journey through the neighborhood, and you have a whole new level of annoyance. Nonetheless, there I sat the next day, but already in a state of commingled pain and numbness from just a few minutes in the rock-hard, cracked pink plastic chair, a new John Scalzi sci-fi in hand. So far, the background noises of the machines and other patrons, including not one, but two screaming toddlers, had prevented me from successfully reading a single page. A short eternity later, the washer containing my first load quite spinning, and sounded a brief buzz to alert me that it was done. Even though the laundromat was moderately crowded, I was lucky that there was an open dryer just opposite my washer, so I dutifully drugged myself out of the torture device, masquerading as a chair, and headed across the room. I bundled a large armful of my socks and tidy whities, turned and dexterously flipped open the dryer lid, only to receive another shock to my hand. This one thankfully much milder than the one from the night before. It still startled me though, and I yelled as I dropped my armload of clothes. "Son of a bitch!" A room full of eyes shifted my direction. "Sorry," I mumbled to no one in particular, returning to my chores. After finishing, I returned to my poor man's pink throne, determined to blot out all distractions and read. 5 minutes later, I was vegetating, staring aimlessly about the laundromat. That was when I first saw it. A hole where no hole should be, reflected in the convex glass door of the ancient washing machine directly across the room from where I sat. I thought, at first, it was a smudge, or even a ding in the glass, but then I noticed the same anomaly replicated in the machine door on either side of this one. The more I examined it, the reflected dark spot, if that's what it was, seemed to float behind me, down near the floor. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. Over the next few hours, I washed and dried 3 loads, returning to watch the spot in between each. If I looked closely enough, I thought I could see it moving ever so slightly, sort of swirling and undulating. There was a hypnotic effect to it, so much so that the mother of one of the screaming kids had to poke me to let me know my last load was done. Finally finished, I stuffed my clothes into a couple pillowcases that were serving as laundry bags and staggered blurry-eyed from the building. Once outside, my head somewhat cleared, and interest in my recent temporary fixation began to wane. My focus turned instead to contemplate the work that I was now seriously behind on, thanks to the storm and extended laundry duties, as I headed for home. Walking up the steps to my building, momentarily fumbling for my keys, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the glass windows that outline the main doorway, and I froze. The spot, or whatever the damn thing actually was, had somehow followed me. I stared in confusion. It didn't seem possible, yet there it was unmistakably in the reflection, hovering in the same vicinity behind me and just above the ground, like it had appeared before. I spun my head around, and just like before, there was nothing to be seen behind me. Against my better judgment, I spun my attention back to examine the reflection in the window. The spot was indeed there, but it had changed. While I had been walking home, it had grown larger and had begun to emit flashes of light from its swirling center. Just a speck appearing here and there, briefly shining through before the undulating mass rolled and blotted it out again. And along with the reflection, there was now an accompanying sound, a faint tinkling, like a set of wind chimes, coming from the direction of the spot. Unlike chimes, though, that came and went randomly with the wind, these played a melodic tune. Their cadence captured my attention, the rhythm lulling me into a trance. I listened and I stared. For how long, I couldn't say. With some effort, I pulled my gaze away from the window and the spot, focusing down on my now clenched hands. The chimes cut off cleanly as the spot slipped from my peripheral vision. Fear replaced my confusion. I quickly unlocked the door and hurried inside, my heart pounding out a trip hammer beat. I needed to get to my apartment, but avoid anything reflective along the way. The elevator was out of the question, so I kept my head down and headed for the stairs. The stairway provided temporary safety, with its dingy concrete steps and unadorned walls. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. As I climbed, I began to inventory the hazards that still awaited me. Once inside my own door, there lurked a multitude of windows, pictures, and mirrors, both big and small. TVs, appliances, and even my computers, and all had to be avoided. I reached my door without incident, and took a few moments to calm my nerves. As I waited, I couldn't help questioning the reality of what I thought had just happened. Was I really cowering outside my own door? In the hallway, I had traversed countless times, afraid of seeing some malevolent object in anything reflective. I tried to tell myself that this was foolishness, akin to a kid afraid of the dark for no apparent reason, other than it wasn't light. Or was there a better explanation? The shock during the storm. That had to be the cause, I reasoned. Maybe some brain damage, not much, but enough to make me see spots and floating objects that weren't really there, and hear things that weren't there either. Why not? I had not quite, but almost convinced myself that this could all be rationally explained. I still wasn't ready to raise my line of sight above floor level, but I entered the apartment much calmer than I had been only moments before. I thought about the little kid me again, afraid of the dark, and remembered walking through the house turning on all the lights, telling myself that even though I wasn't really afraid, the lights were just a harmless precaution. With that as my mindset, I retrieved a handful of towels and blankets and proceeded through my apartment, covertly covering anything reflective as I went. Collapsing at my desk, having covered my monitors with a sheet, I started theorizing how I could live like this until I could get to a doctor for help. I rationalized, even if the spot wasn't real, I still had to deal with its effects until I could be assured that it was gone. As I was ticking off tasks needed to stay functional, disable monitor screensavers, figure out how to go out in public, maybe wear a hoodie with the strings pulled tight to minimize my field of view, my phone rang. I reflexively reached for it out of habit and had just enough time to register that it was my mom calling before I saw it again, reflected in the dark glass of my cell phone. It floated higher now, and it was still growing, perhaps balloon-sized now. I could see variation in colors, shades of gray to black, swirling and heaving in rippling folds. The flashes of light had increased their brightness, still appearing briefly in the dark mass before being reconsumed. The chimes returned as well, grabbing my attention so completely that answering my mother's call was beyond my capabilities. I watched and listened, unsure whether sight or sound was the more compelling sensation. As my phone ringing stopped, I heard another sound, low and hidden underneath the chimes. There was nothing melodic about this new sound, and it struck a fresh fear into my mind. It resonated wet and heavy, like some ancient Lovecraftian god of old dragging itself from dark, mysterious depths. As I listened, the chimes clashed with the new noise in a strange auditory battle for supremacy. As I watched, the spot slowly grew. I could see it changing in the reflection, but knew it was occurring behind me, and at the same time, knew that there would be nothing there to see if I had been able to turn and look. Rigid with fear, I couldn't look away, helpless to alter my situation. As I sat incapacitated, a fresh horror arose. Like soft tendrils at first, I sensed what felt like a pair of many-fingered hands creep over my shoulders and down my chest. Their caress was almost sensual as they moved down to me waist, where the sensation changed to a grip. There was no real strength in the ghostly hands, but the feeling was inexplicably drawing me backward, back to where the spot awaited. Sensual became coaxing. Coaxing turned to seductive, then finally approached insistence. Unable to resist, I tried rolling myself backward as I sat in the desk chair. The chair casters did not turn smoothly against the carpet, or I might have succeeded in my retreat to God. Only knows what fate the spot had planned for me. As I flexed my legs to overcome the drag of the carpet, my loving yet meddlesome mother came to my rescue. I hadn't answered her previous call, and she hadn't left a message. Her routine in such situations was to wait 10 minutes and call again, using the time to compose an appropriately thoughtful yet guilt-inducing message to leave. The phone chirped loudly in my hand, enough to startle me and cause me to drop it. Luck being on my side for once in my life, it landed screen down. I pulled a slew of papers, coasters, and even a dirty plate off my desk, whatever was within reach, to cover it. The onslaught had ceased in a flash. I spent the rest of that night living like a blind man. I tied a shirt around my head for a blindfold and wore it constantly, not trusting myself to just keep my eyes closed. Somehow, with face recognition and Siri's help, I managed to call and check the hours for the urgent care facility a few blocks away, my plan being to arrive as the doors opened in the morning. After inexplicably getting a few hours sleep, mostly from exhaustion, and having neither eaten nor showered since the previous morning, I found myself contemplating just how best to navigate walking the 6 blocks to the doctor. I couldn't very well walk down the street blindfolded, so I had employed my hoodie idea. With the opening pulled down to just an unnerving few square inches, I ventured out. Other than sideswiping a garbage can and nearly colliding with a couple of emerging coffee shop patrons, my tunnel vision trek was proceeding without any serious issues until I needed to cross the main road. So far, I had only encountered side street intersections, with little to no traffic at this hour, but the medical facility was on the opposite side of the 4-lane. As I waited at the light, head down and listening for the chirping noise that told me it was safe to cross, I reassuringly told myself that I was going to make it, that the doctor would scan my head, prescribe a pill, or send me to some specialist who would know exactly how to cure what ailed me. Having made it this far unscathed, I was feeling just a sliver of optimism as the chirp came, and I stepped into the street. I may have been distracted, or it may have made no difference. I heard a motor racing, just a bit, to my right. Nothing particularly menacing, but enough to draw my attention. Just like answering the phone, I instinctively looked up ever so slightly to assure myself that I wasn't about to be run over. And there it was. A spotlessly clean storefront window, advertising the coming fall fashions. Spotless, that is, except for the spot I had been avoiding. The result was instantaneous. The ethereal chimes and fearsome dragging sounds, the forceful groping fingers upon my chest, urging me backward, and the sight of the ever-growing, surging spot itself, all manifested collectively. Reflected in the glass, the spot now loomed, grown larger than me. Its depths beckoned, its darkness seductive. I stopped, then reversed direction in the crosswalk, shuffling backward toward the maw of the thing that had been pursuing me. I was a part of the reflection this time, and I watched as my fate unfolded behind me. The flashing lights became blue-white arcs, dancing wildly just behind me, reaching out to welcome me or strike me dead, I knew not which, when a delivery truck pulled to the stoplight and blocked the window from my view. Released, I collapsed. Horns blared, onlookers undoubtedly gawked, and a young girl actually stepped up and asked me if I needed help. I ignored them all. Abandoning my optimistic hopes for a medical miracle cure, I staggered to my feet, pulled my hoodie strings tighter, and ran. I desperately wanted to run away. But how can you run away from a reflection, from an entity that follows you always? So I ran towards something, or rather, somewhere. I ran blindly to the laundromat. It made no logical sense, but logic had been left far behind sometime yesterday. As I had laid awake last night, my mind had reeled through scenarios, causes, and plans for what had been happening. The doctor had remained as plan A. My plan B made no sense whatsoever, but it flowed forward like a lifeline as I ran. Miraculously, I arrived at the laundromat without being run over or seeing another reflection. The laundromat hadn't opened yet, but that wasn't going to deter me. I pried the painted metal top off a public trash can, and with my eyes closed, beat it against the front window until it shattered. I carefully crawled through and headed for the door in the rear of the building marked Employees Only. It was thankfully unlocked. Once inside, it took little time to find something that would serve my purposes. A large screwdriver in an old toolbox. Back in the laundromat was an array of electrical panels mounted on the back wall, variously marked high voltage, danger 220/208 volts, or just electrical hazard. I had noticed these while gazing idly about the room the day before. Without hesitating to think, I pried the door open on the largest of the panels, held the screwdriver by the metal blade to assure good contact, and jammed it across the incoming leads. And woke up here in the hospital in the psychiatric ward about 2 weeks ago. Guess you know the rest, Doc. I refused to open my eyes until anything reflective was removed from the room, the curtains drawn. Not sure what else I demanded. but I got sedated for it. I do remember. Under the care of your colleagues, though, I'm calmer and less prone to delusions. In just this short time, I've progressed to where I can actually look at myself in a mirror. I don't like to, but I can do it. Well, you do seem to have made incredible progress, Mr. Buchanan. Please, just Jerry. Okay, Jerry. And I did want to apologize again for you getting shuffled about here a bit. We seem to have quite the rash of absenteeism lately. I hope there isn't anything contagious being passed around. Oh, I'm sure you'll get to the bottom of it, Doc, I said, rising and extending my hand. I wanted to thank you and your team again for all you've done. As he reached out to shake my hand, he flinched his own. Oh, got a little shock from you, Jerry. Yeah, that happens. Probably just static. What lies beneath? Summer, 1972. Road trip! Pam screamed over the sound of the jukebox. She had shoved her chair aside, since there was no dance floor in this hole-in-wall bar. Her arms in the air, hips bumping and grinding to the beat, feet barely moving. After half a pitcher, she could sway her hips or move her feet. She opted for swaying to Otis Redding. Wastin' time. Barb was still capable of doing a fair lip sync of sitting on the dock of the bay. Pam a tad too wasted to remember all the words, fancying themselves the last hippies, the two girls planning to leave their homes in Georgia and head for the Frisco Bay. A few weeks earlier, Barb had bought a '58 VW van, orange, of course. Whoever had owned Old Orange before had taken out the rear benches and built a sleeping platform, leaving plenty of storage underneath. About 10 days into the trip, by the time they came to Houston, they realized that the air hose, a vital necessity to cool the engine, would not stay where it was supposed to be. So, taking the southern route through the desert was out of the question. So, they turned right toward Dallas. Old Orange had a few other minor quirks. For instance, the radio only worked in third and fourth gear. The windshield wipers only went one way. After each swipe, whoever was in the passenger seat needed to pound on the windshield to dislodge the wiper. Orange's top speed was 50 miles per hour if the wind was at their back, a little faster if going downhill. The starter had left them in New Orleans, which showed remarkable good taste for a starter, and made Pam the designated pusher. In Dallas, they learned the expensive lesson that transmissions require fluids. They spent a week in a tiny village at Lake Superior Shore, where the main entertainment was going to the dump and watching the bears feed. Pointing west again, the plan was to bypass Denver and go to Aspen. Orange was willing but unable to keep the minimum speed of 40 km/h while climbing up I-70. Once again, a detour was needed. They headed north into Wyoming before turning west again. 2 days later, they left Jackson Hole after breakfast and entered the Grand Tetons with its raw, relatively young peaks. Mid-morning, they pulled in at a rest stop next to a small lake. It was mid-June. The north slope had been warmed by the sun for several weeks and was carpeted with wildflowers. Every color in the rainbow, and all the ones in between. The south side was still holding on to patches of snow. This contrast, on either side of the still water, reflecting the blue sky, was breathtaking. While Barb was coaxing enough life from the Coleman stove to heat water, Pam stretched her legs. Avoiding the clumps of snow and sludge, she made her way up the south hill. Feeling a rumble in the ground, she was stunned at the sight. When she looked over the top of the hill, animals. Moose, elk, deer, rabbits, skunks, buffalo, the odd wolf, all running eastward. Pam was a city girl, but even she thought this was strange. None of the animals paid any attention to her or each other. They ran, stampeded across the meadow as fast as their legs would move. Worried, she returned to the van. Barb listened and shrugged. "It's nothing," she said. "If there was a fire, they would have closed the park. Let's have our coffee and go on." Pam wasn't so sure, but took her word for it. Soon they drove on, admiring the breathtaking majesty that are the Tetons. By early afternoon, they entered the Visitors Center of Yellowstone Park. Right on time, which meant too late to get front row seats. Or rather, front row standing spots to watch the show. While the summer intern was giving a play-by-play, Old Faithful did its thing. "Well, folks, thank you for coming. If you want to see it again, please come back in." Old Faithful spewed again. "Wow," the kid gushed. "That's a first." And again, another plume of sulfuric steam erupted. The intern stood staring, mouth open. Everybody felt the rumble. Some may have been more alarmed than others, but they all felt it. Old Faithful was quiet for a few minutes. People dared to exhale in relief. Pam just wanted to grab Barb and run, but she didn't. She stayed with the other tourists and stared, and then another spurt. No, that's not the right word. A geyser, a flume. Oh, hell. Let's just call it what it was. An eruption. The hot, sulfuric steam bubbled up and erupted, overstepping its recognized boundaries, and sprayed over the poor, hapless tourists who were standing on the eastern boardwalk. This time, Pam dragged her friend away. Barb jumped in the driver's seat, while Pam, since that was her job, pushed the old relic off. As soon as Barb was able to turn the engine over, Pam ran and jumped in the passenger seat. People were screaming, running, elbowing, pushing and stumbling over each other. Some looked like extras in a horror movie. Faces burned, clothing melting to their skin. Only this was real. She didn't want to watch, didn't want to see. But it's like a massive pile-up. You just have to. Pam gasped when she saw the head Just think of the slobbering, angry head, the poster child of the Jurassic Park movies, the face only a mother could love. That's what reared up out of the boiling water. It had had eons to incubate and mature, and that day it was ready to claim its heritage. If they'd taken the time, they might have wondered how many of those creatures had laid their eggs in the warm springs of Yellowstone. How many eggs had survived the long winter that followed the meteor impact? The one that extinguished this one's mommy and daddy. They didn't have to ask or wonder, because just as Barb was able to back up without running over anyone, another one crawled out. This one had wings, and within minutes took flight, fully grown. Or at least, hopefully, it was full grown. If this was just a baby, it could gown up to be much bigger than a jumbo jet. Much, much bigger. The lake, that famous tourist attraction, that placid aqua blue, edged in yellow circle, was now a churning cauldron with prehistoric critters peeking out before clambering ashore, screeching, howling, and knocking over, crushing anything in their paths. "Go, please go," Pam begged. "I can't," Barb cried. "I want to, but I can't make myself drive over anyone. If you don't, they will." Pam pointed to the creatures that were crawling out of the water. "Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit." Barb summed up the situation, though they knew it was time to haul ass. And even then, it might be too late. They sat there in the deceptive safety of Vol.2 and stared as one grotesque beast after another crawled out of the boiling water. "Go," Pam whimpered. "Go, please, go, Barb." She nudged, shook, punched, did what she could to make Barb wake up. "Go," she screamed, with a curse and a shudder. Barb put her foot on the gas and jumped forward. "Don't stall, don't stall, don't stall." Pam prayed as she turned backward in her seat and watched the first tree burst spontaneously into flames. "Faster, Barb, faster." Barb was a good driver. That day, she turned into an excellent demolition derby driver. Aggressively, she drove around everybody, forced people into ditches and off the side of the mountain. She prayed, the act of contrition. "O my Lord God, I am heartily sorry for offending thee." All the way into Idaho, they had grumbled the day before, when the gas station in Jacken Hole had gouged them, when the pump claimed to have put 12 gallons into a half-full 10-gallon tank, then charged them the usury price of 42 cents per gallon for the privilege. But at least they had a full tank, and they were going downhill, which in the little old van was a plus, a great plus. Maybe those flying creatures were colorblind and couldn't see orange because cars left and right, front and back of them were picked up and dribbled like basketballs, rolled like marbles, stepped on like empty beer cans. But Barb weaved and bobbed and evaded their games. It didn't take long, just a few millennia, to make it to Shoshone ice caves, where they huddled with hundreds of other refugees, till the National Guard came to tell them that it was safe to leave the cave. Pam and Barb never made it to San Francisco. Old Orange threw a rod the next day. Blow your head off. Caution. Based on true story. Contains gore. It's all fun and games. Until you blow your head off. Before the 1960s, before I made this my home, our lovely town was known for stately elm trees canopying the main street north of the river. But a deadly elm tree disease raged through, infecting them all. The ones not killed quickly succumbed to progress, as the street was widened to 4 lanes instead of 2 for the thoroughfare through town. The Men's Garden Club decided to beautify the landscape by planting a few flowers. That project soon turned into lovely, bright pink petunias lining all the main highways in the city. When my dad took a job at the local mental health asylum before he moved the rest of us here, I remember him sending us a postcard showing the streets lined with petunias sweeping under the memorial arch, with the name of the town emblazoned upon it. Another landmark of the town. When our family arrived, that was the first sight I saw of our new home. As the plantings increased, a petition was made to the state, and soon the community of 15,000 was dubbed the Petunia City. In a short time, an annual celebration was created to honor the designation, called the Petunia Festival, held around the 4th of July. The festival midway games and rides, along with arts and craft or car shows, bingo, and a beer garden with live bands, attracted huge crowds from all over. It even became renowned enough that a popular game show in the early 70s, The Dating Game, presented a trip to the Petunia Festival as the grand prize to the winning couple. Welcomed as dignitaries, the excited couple became the grand marshals of the parade that year. I'm sure the experience made a lasting impression on them. The party always ended with a spectacular fireworks display, locally provided by a certified trained family who volunteered their services. In my teenage years, in a town without a lot to do other than cruising Galena Avenue from Peoria Avenue to the south, to Lowell Park Road, to the north, back and forth, not counting stopping to sit at the courthouse corner to wave at other cruisers. The 4th of July Petunia Festival was the highlight of the summer. Lots of fun and games. Walking the midway hand in hand with someone special. Hawkers trying to get him to win you a prize. Stealing a kiss on top of the Ferris wheel. Eating elephant ears and corn dogs. Feeling nauseous after the spinning rides. Participating in the talent contest. Dancing to the music. Watching the marching bands compete. In my very young motherhood years, it was a struggle to get all my children downtown, at least for the fireworks. This particular year stands out in my memory. My husband was a police officer on a small police force, overstressed as the population exploded on those few days. He was not available to help much with the family. We may have taken the little ones to Kids' Day for a short time to ride the kiddie rides. The carnival company often comped the force a few free coupons, and I may have gotten my younger sister to walk the few blocks from my parents' house to the parade route alongside me with the stroller and the other two in tow. What little ones don't love a parade? But for the fireworks, I was on my own. Anyway, I don't remember planning to go with anyone else. My high school sweetheart husband and I had 4 kids in 5 years, back in the early 70s. I believe their ages at the time must have been 5, 4, 2, and I was expecting my bicentennial baby. Exactly why I thought it was even necessary to attend those sparklers on my own with all those babes. In my condition, I'll never know. The festival is held on the high school grounds along the river. A lovely setting for the fireworks, reflecting over the river. Trouble is, there aren't any parking lots close by, which means street parking wherever and however close you can get. The viewing is great if you can get to standing room only on the bridge. Otherwise, it is, well, up in the air. Hard to tell until the blossoms start exactly where you can see them from, due to trees blocking most displays. Over the years, one thinks they have it figured out. Then the organizers suddenly decide to change the venue. Starting point. I cannot tell you how many different viewing spots we have selected or rejected. Anyway, back to my waddling all over town stroller and 2 cranky, tired toddlers in tow. Nice grassy spot at end of bridge, big enough for blanket and maybe a shot at seeing something. Hope the noise isn't too scary for my tots. For some reason, I am remembering when I was little, I never wanted to get too close, for fear a spark might land on me. Anytime I saw someone in a wheelchair, I wondered if that is what happened to them. Hello, Mary. So nice to see you. My musing was interrupted by a somewhat familiar voice. Oh, great. My old boyfriend. Wouldn't you know, haven't seen him for years. And he finds me looking oh so fine. Hi, Joe. Great to see you too. You remember Maureen, right? Her family moved into the old Victorian farmhouse you used to live in. We got married. We are expecting our first baby. Looks like you have another on the way. Are all of these yours? Can never have too many. Congratulations to both of you. They have a way of changing your life, but in a good way. Well, enjoy the show, and best of luck to you. And to you, too. The bombs, booms have started. Thank goodness. My little troop actually were enjoying the action. Even with all the noise and commotion around us, seemed it was ramping up. Then suddenly, it all went silent. There was an extremely long pause, way longer than I ever remember, between starbursts. The crowd noticed and seemed to get fidgety and restless. That display was far shorter than usual, and there was no grand finale when they send up multiples at one time. Were they that short on funds this year? Sometimes they would send out donation seekers to pay for next year's display. No one had been around to our corner yet, and the time dragged on and on. Suddenly, you could hear the wails of ambulances. Oh no! Something bad must have happened. They are headed to the area the fireworks are detonated. That is not good. Not good at all. There was mumbling among the crowd. It was obvious the show was over for the night, and people started drifting away, scratching their heads and wondering why. I gathered my crew, and we started our trek back to our vehicle. My husband knew, and it wasn't good. The young man in charge of lighting off the display had a problem with one tube. No one present actually saw the moment it happened, but he must have been leaning over the faulty tube, looking for the problem, when it exploded in his face, decapitating him. All the witnesses could immediately see was him engulfed in smoke. I didn't know it at the time, but this man lived in our neighborhood. His 2 children went to school with my children. His widow never did remarry and passed away a few years ago. She was a very strong woman to survive what she did and raise her children on her own. The tragedy was also devastating to the Petunia Festival. The Paul pulled the fireworks off the agenda for years afterwards. The event will turn 60 years old this summer. Yes, it is all fun and games until someone blows his head off. He's right behind you. We'd go out around 1, climbing through bedroom windows. We'd try to land softly on bushes and backyard lawns. Some of us went barefoot. Some hid a spare pair of sneakers under porches or tucked under tarps used for covering patio furniture. Some of us just liked being barefoot. It made us feel as though we'd have the strength that comes from mimicking the uncivilized. Some of us would play the whole game with no shoes. No shoes, no shirts. One of us liked to play the game in only his boxer shorts. He would dare anyone to mention his near-nakedness. I'm not gay for running around the woods in my underwear. You're all gay for looking at me in my underwear. This is teenage logic. Everything is a chess match where both players have only recently discovered how to play Monopoly. Board games were daytime affairs. We would play them by the above-ground pools and in basements while our parents were at work. We were old enough to be home alone, provided we memorized the phone numbers of all the retired neighbors who could, theoretically, get to us quickly in the event of an emergency. Practically speaking, 70-year-old Mrs. Hasher would not have been able to help any of us had a deranged murderer targeted us the way they did in the cable movies we weren't supposed to watch. But our parents told themselves stories the same way we did. Stories about safety. Stories about good neighborhoods. Stories about how much a locked door could accomplish. Years ago, a girl had been abducted from her home on our street. But the rumor was she opened the door when a stranger knocked. Our parents didn't say it, but they secretly believed that meant she deserved to be kidnapped. I mean, if your kid is dumb enough to open up the door for just anybody, they told themselves that we, their children, were smarter than that. Smarter than that girl. We were not smarter. We were, in fact, a lot dumber than her. Of course, we didn't know that. We thought we were geniuses. Genius, warrior, punks with wisdom and ferocity, and all before our 15th birthday. We believed people were jealous of us, but we didn't know who these people might be. We believed that everyone at school had gone to at least second base, and we were ashamed to have never seen a naked girl in real life. We laughed at the word condom, but we believed, given the opportunity, that we would be intrinsically fantastic at lovemaking. At school, we had posters in our locker of Sarah Michelle Gellar and Jennifer Love Hewitt, and those of us who had gone to first base had that one poster of Cameron Diaz that would have gotten us suspended if a teacher saw it. We'd gather at each other's lockers and discuss the arrangements for the game that night. We'd agree on a spot in the woods. Some of us liked meeting at the tree that had been split in half by lighting. Some liked the rock formation that resembled an old man kneeling with his head down. Once the location was agreed upon, we'd argue about the time. Some of us wanted to meet at midnight on the dot. We didn't realize that we were in love with the poetry of it, because we swore we hated poetry based on what our teachers had us read. Some wanted to do it later, much later. Some wanted to meet at 3 or 4 so that the game would last until dawn. Tomorrow's Saturday. We don't have school. What's the problem? The problem was that some of our parents got up around dawn. Some of our mothers would have a heart attack if they woke up and found our beds empty. Some of us didn't want to worry our parents. Some of our fathers used a belt if we misbehaved. Some of us cared about our parents too much to let them know what their children were up to at night. Some of us feared our parents more than we feared anything in the woods. Some of us feared nothing. Some of us loved the idea of being gone when our parents woke up, making them think that we'd escaped, that we were on a runway train somewhere, moving further and further away from them. Some of us liked the feeling of the belt on our skin because it solidified the hate we felt for the people we were meant to love the hardest. We'd usually meet a little after 1. If it was warm out, we'd meet by the lake where the summer camp used to be, until it went out of business. The cabins were still there, and the picnic tables, and the signs that said mess hall and nurse's office. The paint on the signs was fading. Vines were growing over the cabin windows. We didn't explore the camp at night. Even the bravest among us weren't that fearless. We'd seen at least one horror movie that took place at a camp, and we didn't want to be chased by a man with a mask. We only wanted to play a game. In our game, if you followed the rules, you didn't get hurt. Nothing bad happened. If you broke the rules, the game was over for you. But that was it. No injuries, no harm. It was all about stamina, sustaining yourself throughout the night. There wasn't really any loss. There wasn't even a real way to win. Bragging rights were all we had to play for, and yet they seemed more valuable than the $100 bills our fathers would leave out on the kitchen counter, as though tempting us to steal. Some of us did steal. Some of us felt the belt. Some of us liked it. But we'd never say who. We started by the lake, and we faced off against each other, eye to eye with another boy standing a foot away from you. That was how it began. We would face each other, take a deep breath, and say, "He's right behind you." One of us would say it. The other would listen. Then the other person would say it. "He's right behind you." And we would escalate the intensity. The rule was that you could not say anything other than those 4 words, but you could say them however you liked. We could shout them at each other. We could whisper them. Those of us who were more strategic knew that volume wasn't enough. It was about having an action, an objective. It was important to keep a verb in mind. Beg, cajole, beseech, caution, plead, convince, convince, convince. He's right behind you. It didn't matter that we played this game several times a week for 2 years. It didn't matter that we knew that nobody was behind us. Inevitably, someone would get spooked. One of us would run home. That first hint of terror was contagious. Soon, more of us would be retreating back to our homes. It was rare that more than 3 or 4 of us would be left by the end of the night. If your partner ran away, you would find someone else who had also lost their partner, and you would face off against them, speaking the 4 words. If you were the only one without a partner, you stood silently and waited for someone to leave. Like most boys our age, we had no respect for anything we were meant to respect, and the utmost respect for imaginary things and made-up scenarios, school and church and authority and death were all laughable to us. But this game that we had created out of nothing, this was something to be taken seriously. None of us could remember who started it. Maybe an older boy who had since graduated from childishly sneaking out of his room at night. Maybe we all put it together like a story composed of hormones and dirty sweat. Maybe it didn't matter. All that mattered was keeping keeping it alive for as long as we could. We never spoke of the game outside of planning it between classes at our lockers. We never talked about who was good at it or bad at it. We never talked about who stayed the longest or who left first. We just played. We played, and we never planned to stop playing. One night, one of us was staring at his partner when he saw the other boy's eyes look slightly to the left. This was against the rules. You only looked at your partner. You used the 4 words to scare them, if you could. You didn't involve physicality, not even a slight shift in focus. The other boy began to shake his head. This was wrong. This was against the rules. None of us knew what to do if someone broke the rules, because nobody had ever broken the rules. There were no referees, and even if there were, it wouldn't have mattered now, because there were only 2 boys left on that night. The other boy appeared to almost choke. He coughed out the words, "He's right behind you." The other boy looked as though he was going to raise an arm, raise a hand, point to something. Instead, he ran off. The other boy wasn't supposed to run off. You were supposed to wait until the other person said the 4 words. You were supposed to give them a chance to scare you back. One of us stood there that night, all alone, and felt an immense pride extending down his shoulders and off into the ground below his feet. He was the only one left. A laugh barked past his lips. It was a nervous laugh, but he didn't know where the nerves were coming from, and he wondered if he could get home before his father banged on his door to wake him up for school. If not, it would be the belt. But did that mean anything? He was the last one of us still standing there in the woods. "He's right behind me." He didn't know why he said it. It wasn't true. There was nobody behind him. Every sound was natural. Every presence an imagined one. Every instinct to flee was his paranoia trying to torment him now that all his fellow competitors were gone. He would stand in the woods for as long as he liked. He would enjoy this moment. Despite winning nothing, he would tell himself he was a winner. He was no longer one of us. He was someone else. "He's right behind me," but the game was over. There was nobody left to scare. The selfie of Dorian Gray. Picture this. Dorian Gray, 25, gorgeous bachelor of the Brighton, gay scene handsome, F Queen, slay. Picture his blazing blue eyes, set above aquiline nose and a rosebud pout of a mouth. Cheeks ready to blush under the lick of glitter from a makeup brush. Deep gold locks styled to perfection. Forehead wide and empty as a summer sky. Beauty not brains image as everything skin deep. Picture this. Dorian perched on the sleek leather and chrome of a bar stool in the poison ivy, margarita in one hand and phone in the other. Twin totems of the god of the gay bar. Picture his thumb hitting the camera app. Muscle memory leads him there always, and hovering now over the shutter button. Picture him pausing for a fragment of time to check the image on the phone screen. It is, as always, empty perfection. Click. There it is. The button is pressed, the shutter closes, the selfie is taken, and all around him, life continues in the poison ivy. The disco ball spins. Lady Gaga roars through over-amplified speakers. A drag queen at the bar wipes lipstick and white wine from a red twist of a mouth. But for Dorian Gray, life has stopped. Here. Now. In this moment. The moment the selfie was taken. Live in the moment. Look. Good feel good. Self-love. Because, as he licks the salt rim of his margarita glass from perfectly glossed lips, Dorian realizes that he has taken the best selfie ever. What is it about this selfie that makes it so exquisite? Is it the background of dancers blurring to hot whirls of color? Is it the shards of light from the disco ball falling like a shower of diamonds across the face? No. It is the face itself, caught at the very moment of its blooming, like a young rose. Beautiful. Dorian knows, the instant he sees the selfie, that there, right there in front of him, swimming in a million pixels, is the great truth he's searched for his whole life. Beauty. What would you like? The barman asks, plucking an olive from a discarded martini glass and popping it into his lipsticked mouth. I'd like, says Dorian. I'd like it if this selfie aged instead of me. You what? The barman hollers over Gaga's jagged vocals. I'd like another margarita, Dorian says, but Dorian's wish came true. Picture this. Years later, Dorian is flicking through his phone when up pops the selfie. Throwback. Memories. 10-year challenge. Picture Dorian, 35, and still on the cusp of blooming like a young rose, locking eyes with the image of his 25-year-old self, but not the image as he left it 10 years previously. No. For etched into the selfie, right there in front of him, are the tide lines of age, wrinkles beginning to show on the forehead, the skin wilting around the aquiline nose, twin creases either side of the rosebud pout of a mouth. Dorian sees, too, a certain sneer, a certain curl of the lip, not present in the original selfie #bitchface, #meangirl, #judging you. Was it the many times he'd put others down on the basis of their looks? The many ugly comments he'd made on another's ugliness that had written that sneer into the selfie? Did the curl of the lip evidence a life lived in selfishness, selfie stick in hand, and judgment in mind? Dorian swipes off the selfie, a cold sweat of horror breaking out on his preternaturally youthful brow. He tries putting a softening filter on the selfie, hoping to erase those harsh lines. But the app glitches and increases the contrast on the image, only etching those lines deeper into brow and cheek. Like a narcissus staring into troubled waters, Dorian recoils in disgust from the sight of his own image. Oh, not feeling cute? Bad hair day. He clicks off the app, fingers barely shaking, and runs to the bathroom. Looking into the perfect circle of the stylish chrome-rimmed mirror, home decor hasher, interior design, trendsetter, Dorian scours his face for wrinkles, blemishes, imperfections. But he finds, as always, the same strange youth, the same pure beauty that is synonymous with his reputation in gay bars, from the pier to the marina. Hands clammy on the cold porcelain of the sink, Dorian exhales and spits from his perfect mouth the salivation that warns him he will vomit. Leaning over the toilet, he pukes onto the perfect white porcelain, loops of saliva falling from his face like hot tears of shame and disgrace. Dorian commits himself to a life of velvety pleasures and empty aesthetics. He progresses his modeling career at the London fashion shows. Strike, a pose, model life, catwalk. In his spare time, he buys designer handbags in the lanes and showcases his latest outfits in the bars of Kemptown. At night, the selfie haunts his dreams, mouth twisted in hideous grin, cheek disgraced by defects, brow wrecked by wrinkles, a face defaced by imperfections. The years pass in a blur of nights spent knocking back shots in Bulldog, Cheers, down at happy hour. But still, Dorian's face stays young. He courts a beautiful drag queen, name of Sybil, dreams of the lavish wedding they'll have. In bars, they sip sex on the beach together and rate the other twinks on their looks in loud whispers. Roast me, 2 out of 10. Fugly. In dark bedrooms with drawn curtains, they smoke Tina with hookers and dropouts. At the nudist beach, they work on their tans, but soon Dorian and Sybil are fighting. Conversation withering to ridicule and cheap digs. Picture this. The couple at 2 a.m. on St. James Street, roaring insults and comebacks at each other with beer-soaked breath, like baying stags. "You're a right bitch," Dorian screams. "A nasty, cheap, tranny whore." He flings his pint glass to the gutter and struts off into the night. Picture this. Dorian is 45, and as his age has increased, so too has his reputation for youthful good looks. He launches his own line of face cream, skin care, anti-aging results. He proposes to Sybil. They break it off. They get back together. They break it off again. The night they call off the engagement for the second time, Dorian sits somber at the dressing table in his bedroom. He stares into the vanity mirror, his face flawless, even in the bright white light of the bare bulbs, searching for flaws. Any clue as to why Sybil left him. But he finds, as always, perfection. The selfie haunts his thoughts like an unwelcome ghost. He pulls out his phone and clicks on the photo app. He pulls up the selfie and finds it more hideous than ever. Crow's feet at the corners of the eyes, scoops of black shadow underneath them, a complex network of wrinkles deep cut into the face. And still, that hideous, exaggerated sneer, like the face of a horrible puppet. "It's just a selfie," he says. "It doesn't look like me. I cannot look that bad, surely." Reassuring himself, Dorian decides to take action. Why let a selfie ruin your night? Why let a photo curb your self-esteem? Quickly, before he changes his mind, Dorian clicks on the bin icon. A message flashes up on the screen. Delete photo. He pauses for just a fraction of a second, shaking finger hovering over the button, and presses it. Picture this. Sybil, the next day, hungover and contrite and missing her boyfriend, mounting the stairs to Dorian's flat in her stilettos. Heel clicks echoing in the otherwise silent stairwell. She knocks on the door. Silence. She fumbles in her rhinestoned handbag for the spare key and lets herself in. Inside the flat, everything is in its usual perfect order. Dorian's designer coats hang in the entranceway. A half-drunk bottle of Chablis sits on the marble worktop, illuminated like a yellow jewel in the beam of a kitchen spotlight. The Dyson tower fan blasts out cool air in the lounge. 2,000 watts, but 700 cubic meters per hour. Ultimate cooling technology. It blasts a jet of cold across Sybil's fish-netted legs, like an icy river or a ghost passing through her. Dorian? Silence still. She checks everywhere, and letting herself into the last room, the bedroom, she finds it empty. She pulls back the bed sheets. Nothing. But seeing the door of the walk-in wardrobe ajar, she opens it to find, picture this, Dorian hanging by his neck from the rail. At first, she doesn't recognize him, for the swollen, purple face of the dead man is ugly, carved with deep wrinkles, pocked with blemishes, the lip curled up in a final expression of disdain. By his side, there lies his phone. There were way too many flies for an empty house. Schizophrenia is a bitch, and I don't usually curse when I'm writing. I like the classic style of Stephen Crane and the refined worlds of Oscar Wilde, and I know things have changed a lot since this kind of gentleman went extinct. But still, there is something about correct writing that turns everything into poetry. Even these stories. I continue now. Schizophrenia is a bitch. medicated or unmedicated, dealing with not knowing what is real or not can still be challenging day by day. From the happy little bunnies hopping out of an unexistent hole to say hi graciously and brighten your day, to the four-eyed woman whose face was falling rotten into pieces in front of my astonished eyes, while she only wanted to offer my breakfast one autumn morning. Anything can be frightening. I thought I was never going to have the courage to move far from the city, far from the hospitals, from the gentrification, and the everyday influx of strangers. It made me calm to know I could just pop out a card from my pocket that shows my mental condition, and people would help me in the most scary situations. Reality pushed me outside of the city. I found the best house to which I could move. Affordable, 2 stories, old cracking wooden floors, unfinished basement, and a big yard with space to grow your vegetables, your very own lavender plants, with the freedom to sit outside and write while listening to nothing but the chickadees and robins singing. No neighbors, no annoying neighbors, because as much as I liked the activity of the city, living in a 24 floors building could be a tiny bit too noisy sometimes. A 100-year-old house that needed some love. Honestly, for the price I paid, I had all the love in the world to give. I didn't overthink before buying it. I didn't want to get into details, so I put the signature on the paper and bought it as it was. The first night was a nightmare. The mice activity was so high in the basements and between the walls that it looked like they were throwing me a welcoming party. My eyes were wide open, and I kept just thinking, I need a cat. I need a cat. I need to get a cat. I didn't challenge my judgment or how factual the existence of mice in a house this old would be. I could smell the mice, their nests, their filth, their spawns. And if there is something I rarely get in life, it's olfactory illumination, also called phantom smells. I didn't dare tell any of my family members about the nightmare because I had been told many, many times that moving out of the city was not for everyone. I didn't want to worry my mom. She tried to persuade me to move in with her, inviting me to stay more than once, offering me homemade food, and promising me peace and clean laundry. I spent the night the best I could, turning from one side to the other, trying to get comfortable and used to every noise. I woke up the morning after with a horrible headache when I moved the curtains in the bedroom to let the sunlight in. I saw at least 30 flies, scattered, sunbathing, flapping their wings against one of the windows, and I jumped back to my bed in disgust. I had my phone fully charged and used one of my favorite methods to discover if my mind was playing games or not. I took a picture of the flies. You see, when you have schizophrenia, if you take a picture or make a video, At the precise moment that you see the craziest things, you can actually check on your phone if what you are seeing is real. The mind evolved to be tricky and a vile traitor sometimes. Still, it didn't evolve as much as not to be tricked by a cell phone camera. So the hallucination you are having, if it's just a mere creation of the mind, will not appear either in the video or in a picture. The flies were there. Way too many for a house that had its windows closed for the past few weeks. There was a family there before. I don't think this was normal, even for a country house. It wasn't even summer. The weather didn't look inviting for flies, and my house was not a warm place for them to live happily in. I opened the 4 curtains individually to reveal the flies blackening each window. I sprayed them and saw them fall one by one. I vacuumed the remains and moved to the bathroom for a relaxing bath. Relaxing was something that I wouldn't do for a while. I opened the faucet, and the bubbling sound of dry pipes came first, letting a little string of water fall that looked horribly yellow. By the time my bathtub was full, all I had was pea-colored water that smelled like sulfur, and it made me lose the last drop of hope I had that morning. I walked downstairs to the basement. I had been in a basement twice in my life, and one of those times was when I had to check the new house with the realtor a few weeks before moving. I wouldn't say I liked basements. The swamp smell, the spiders, the spider webs that were abandoned, meaning the spiders are now somewhere else where we can't see them. The mice, their horrible smell, and the furnace, the root of significant nightmares that come from old stories and many, many horror movies that I wish I hadn't seen. I took a gun with me. I know I shouldn't have had one, but my dad, who didn't know better, advised me to take his gun since being alone in a house can be challenging for a woman. My nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, but so was a police station, so I thought it was an okay idea. This time, I had to use it. It was loaded and ready to shoot some cans outside in case my days turned more boring. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard noises coming from the water well. Something was struggling to get out. The well was a little bit deep, but still, anyone my size could have gotten out of there. I thought, well, great. Now I will have to shut a wild animal, because there is no way I will let an upset possum or rabid raccoon roam my basement. I cautiously approached the water well. The noise grew louder and more frantic. My heart pounded in my chest as I gripped my gun tightly, ready to defend myself. With each step closer, the sounds became clearer, and I could hear muffled cries for help. I peered into the darkness, straining my eyes to make sense of shapes. And then, as if emerging from my nightmares, there she was, tied, her clothes torn and covered in filth, her hair tangled, wounded on every inch of her body, her mouth shut, her hands firmly fastened. Her teary eyes called for help, but all I could do was just shoot. I pressed the trigger 1 time, 2, and even 3 times, with my eyes shut and my teeth grinding as hard as I could as she lay there, motionless and calm. I took my phone out of my pocket and did what I should have done before shooting. I took a picture and put myself in the frame, too. The dead body in the background, the dirty well, and me hoping none of it was real. Hoping I wasn't real. I took a picture, and there we were. The flash blinded my eyes, and I saw myself, a newborn killer, staring at the screen. She was still there. Oh, so still. Oh, there were too many flies for an empty house, and without wanting it, I finished someone else's dirty job. The Unbecoming of Belinda Blackwell. There are few places Belinda Blackwell likes to lay down to rest more than upon her husband's chest. He hadn't been expecting her. Belinda hadn't been expecting to be home so soon either. What with the unpredictability of her father's illness, demanding open schedules from his children, someone on call at all times, lest the old man die without one of them there to hold his hand. When Oscar had come to join them a week early, something about a case closing timely and a stiffening in his shoulders. When Belinda inquired about her sister-in-law, she pounced on the opportunity to bid her brother and father adieu and return early to the husband she so desperately missed. Finding Etienne still tangled in their bed covers, she had stripped down to her chemise and crawled atop him slowly. He had thrashed hard upon stirring and finding her there, his eyes foggy with confusion and fright. But she had kissed his face and rubbed his arms, whispering, "It's me. It's only me," until he relaxed back into the sheets. Now they rest quietly, teetering on the line between half asleep and half awake, Belinda's ear pressed to Etienne's chest to hear the steady thump, thump, thump of his heart. "Well, I'm glad Oscar will be with him," Etienne says appeasingly, having listened in silence to her stories from London. I think it will do him as much good as father. He seemed like he could use some time away. Away from what? I'm not sure. Belinda plays with a loose thread on Etienne's nightshirt. I feel bad saying away from his wife, but all signs point to it being the truth. He seemed uncomfortable when I brought her up, but he wouldn't tell me anything specific. Etienne's hand tightens where it rests on the nape of her neck. Then I hope that time will serve them both well. I do too. She tilts her head to observe the strong profile of her husband's nose. "And you?" she teases. "Has time away from me served you well? All I managed to accomplish was missing my wife." He tucks his chin to look down at her. "Though I have been doing some research in your absence. Yes, I've noticed. The entire walk to their chambers was an obstacle course of books and journals on every tabletop and cast aside in the middle of the hallway, like he had thrown them down as he was walking. And before that, there was the cook coming to greet her in the foyer with concerns of her husband's increasingly strange demands while Belinda was away. His supposed need for rabbit hearts and pitchers of salt water, bunches of fresh rosemary left to dry on the windowsill for exactly 36 hours, and demands of her and the housemaid to not disturb him when his doors are closed. Certain tasks he'd undertaken where it was vital he not be interrupted. For the sake of goodwill, she gave them both the rest of the morning off. Belinda knows of her husband's beliefs, glimpses into a world of ritual and wardship, studies of augury and communion and necromancy that he prefers she not get too close to. Etienne shifts underneath her, and she reads discomfort in his movements. She strokes a hand down his cheek, so he knows not to be ashamed of it all on her behalf. What has prompted it? Have I come to see you while I was gone? He's told her, too, of the spirit that haunts him, the one that looks just like her, that follows him around the house and watches him from doorways and windows and stares at him unblinking, stares at him like he's done something unforgivable. Belinda has never seen herself, and Etienne claims the spirit has never appeared while she's in the house. She fretted for days over having to leave him when word of her father's illness arrived, knowing what it might invite back into Etienne's life. But there was no getting around the trip, and besides, Etienne had sworn his confidence that that time was behind them. It would appear that he'd spoken too soon. His eyebrows tick up at the middle, like he's attempting to contain his emotion. I thought it was over, he whispers. It's been so long. I feel like a fool, letting my guard down as I have been. A deep ache swells behind Belinda's ribcage. She squeezes Etienne tighter. You've been happy. It's not foolish to hope. What have you found? There is a ritual, one for banishment. I have been completing the prerequisite steps over the past week. Oh? Belinda struggles to understand. Yes. There is only one step left to do. It won't be easy. His fingers flex against her back, a signal that he is thinking hard. He seems to choose his words carefully. The act won't be physically challenging, but I fear the toll it will have on my heart and constitution. Belinda frowns. It sounds taxing. Are you sure this is the only way? She considers, not for the first time, bringing up the possibility of relocation, abandoning this home that torments him, so in favor of a fresh start, a life away from paranoia and body doubles. She can't see. Before she can muster up the right words, he's saying, "It will be worth it. I want to do it. I want my Belinda to be the only Belinda in my life. She smothers a grin against the column of his throat. I'd quite like that as well. Etienne is quiet for a long moment before speaking again. I won't pretend it isn't terrible, but it is necessary, too. I want my wife to have a good life, and I need to be better to give one to her. I need to be rid of this. A strong rush of affection surges through Belinda. Oh, she loves this man, something awful. She'd follow him into hell. Then you will be brave, and you will be successful. She rises and falls with the depth of Etienne's answering sigh. You sound so much like her, he mutters. Like who? She asks. Like Belinda. Belinda's thumb falters where it was rubbing a soothing path along his collarbone. What? A giggle bubbles out of her, confusion mingling with sleepy amusement. It's uncanny. You've never been this good before. He doesn't seem to register her stiffening, or he does, and ignores it. You've never come to me like this, lay upon me like this. You must know what I'm going to do. Etienne, it won't work. Etienne raises his voice, speaking over her. I won't let it. Belinda lifts her head to look her husband in the eyes. A coldness cracks through her when she sees the resolution in his face. Etienne, I don't... Her voice breaks off into a scared whisper. It's me. He shakes his head. My wife knows me better than this. She tells me when to expect her. You've misjudged. I know you're not really her this time. Belinda curses her attempt at being romantic. He thinks she's haunting him, not surprising him. She's never been so near him when he's in the middle of one of these supposed spectral visits. It's sobering. It's frightening. She tries to sit up and grunts when Etienne uses his hand on her neck to ease her back down again. His hold is strong, not enough to hurt, but in her shock, she goes easy. Etienne's mouth is at her ear. My wife is not to be home for a few days yet. By then, all of this will be dealt with and done. It will be like it never happened. She won't have any part of it. She will not have such a weak, nervous husband. His voice shakes. I will keep her safe. It's all the warning Belinda gets before the knife is plunged into her back. She jerks violently. Pain whips through her, fast and brutal. It's like someone has dumped a full basin of water over her. No. No. The sensation is real. And it's not water. It's blood. Hot and wet and slick and spreading fast, sticking her chemise to her skin. She frantically shoves herself up, grappling for a place on her back she can't reach, too low for the arm she stretches over her shoulder, too high for the one she stretches under. She arches, incapacitated by the pain, her mouth opening and closing like a fish thrown onto rocks, gasping into air that isn't helping her situation, feeling inches from death. The knife digs into her shifting skin. Or is her skin digging into the knife? The awful, writhing, sawing sensation ripping through her. She's never been stabbed before, but this cannot be normal. Flashes of rabbit hearts and salt come to her. And no, of course this isn't normal. Not by Etienne's design, she hunches, trying to scramble away from the pain. But there's nowhere to go that it doesn't follow. She shoves her face into the pillow beside her husband's stunned face, her hands fisting at the sheets. Etienne grips her hips tight. Belinda, she can only answer with a whimper. She's trembling so hard she can barely open her mouth anymore, for how hard her teeth chatter. No. Etienne pushes against her shoulders. She doesn't understand what he wants. She doesn't understand what's happening. Dear God, no. His touch moves to her face, and he wrenches her head back with his hands shoved up into her hair. Belinda. He jams his fingers under her jaw, ignoring her choking, feeling for something. Upon finding it, his face goes white. Belinda. Again, more urgently, wrestling to sit them both upright. Belinda. It's all coming to her in flashes. The horrible red smear on Etienne's cheek. The wetness that's dripping down the back of her legs. The sudden realization that she can't support herself. She slumps against Etienne. Dazedly, she thinks of her parents, of all the men they'd wanted her to marry. A parade of surgeons and doctors with their deep pockets and upturned noses. Professionals who would know what to do with a gaping wound. Professionals she had rejected for the love of a poet. Her poet, who had nothing to offer but a quiet life and endless adoration. Etienne cradles her against him, rocking them back and forth. He's sobbing. Why are you here? You weren't supposed to be here. I thought you were the specter. Please believe me. Oh God, please forgive me. He sounds wrecked. Belinda wants to comfort him, but she can't pick her head up. Then darkness clouds her vision, and she can't do anything at all anymore. Belinda blinks awake. The ground is uncomfortable beneath her back. What is she doing on the ground? Etienne is kneeling by her side, head in his hands. There's something red all over his hands. Belinda pushes herself up, reaching out to touch Etienne's knee. He jolts at the barest brush of her fingers. Belinda. He sounds relieved. He yanks her forward, and she goes crashing against his chest. Why is his heart beating so fast? That red substance on his hands is getting all over her now, staining her crisp, white chemise. Why does it smell so strongly of metal? Her head feels fuzzy. Really? Why is she on the ground? A moment ago, she was laying in bed, gossiping with Etienne about her brother's marriage. Did she fall out of bed? Did she hit her head? Is that why everything feels so off? I'm sorry, she murmurs slowly. I'm not sure what happened. Did I fall? You... Etienne is shaking. She must have really scared him. I fixed it. It's all right. Fixed what? How long was I out? It doesn't matter. You're all right. It's all right now. Belinda frowns. Etienne, is my head bleeding? He winces. What? Why are you asking me that? Blood. She can't think of anything else to say. She should get a cloth, something to clean him with. She pushes away from him, bracing against the edge of the mattress to stand. Her hand sinks into something cold and wet. Before she can search for the source of it, Etienne pitches forward, grabbing her by the cheeks and pulling her to look back at him. It makes her head spin. Don't look, he says. He sounds gravely serious. Belinda's heart stutters. What? Don't look, like a petulant child. Belinda can't stop herself. She's wriggling out of his grip before he can stop her again, ignoring his cry, turning to look at herself, laying dead in a mess of blood on the bed. Upcome. Herself on the bed. Blood. All air leaves her. She jerks to her feet, stumbling backwards. She can't look away. She's just laying there, her hair stuck to her forehead and her chemise soaked through with red. Her eyes are still open. Behind her, Etienne remains on the ground. His voice is low, thick with grief. There was an accident. I did what I had to fix it. What? Her voice sounds like it's coming from miles away. She doesn't even know what to ask. She can't look away. I didn't know if it would work. I had only read about the ritual. I've never attempted it. But the journals said I could comb through time and bring something back with me. He looks up. I brought you. Belinda's stomach turns. Etienne's face is wet with tears. Where is she? You brought me from the past? From before the accident? Yes. It was the only way. You were already gone. His voice breaks, and he hangs his head. His shoulders are shaking. Belinda looks at him. She looks at herself. But what of the Etienne in the past? Are you the same as him? Our paths have diverged, he says gravely. Well, then, what of that Etienne? Is he all alone now? How must he feel, having just had his wife taken from him? Etienne shudders, his eyes darkening. I know how he feels. For some reason, that's what does Belinda in. Her stomach lurches, and she stumbles to the lavatory, shoving the door closed behind her, before retching into the sink. Nothing comes up. It makes her feel worse. She looks up into the mirror. Yes, that's her face, staring back at her with wide eyes and tangled hair. But yes, that was her face, too. staring back at her from the bed. It feels like dying just to think of it. She can't imagine what dying must really feel like. Can't imagine how anything can be worse than this terror that's seizing her insides. Etienne's voice comes from the other side of the door, muffled and pleading. Please, I didn't want this. All I wanted was you. He nudges at the door, like a dog desperate to get in. She staggers over to open it. Etienne is still on his knees, still on the ground. When the door is open wide enough, he drags himself forward with his fingernails digging into the wood floor. He bends low to kiss her ankles. She closes her eyes tight at the sensation. My love, my life. His tears drip onto her foot. I wish I hadn't done it. I wish I hadn't done it. What did you do? A voice in her head begs her to ask, and somewhere deeper, somewhere darker, somewhere inside her that already knows, somewhere she can't reach, is asking, which part do you regret? Tessa. They bury Belinda in the garden. Belinda watches numbly while Etienne strips that other her from the bloody chemise, redressing her in something soft and clean. He gathers her hair and fastens it into a braid to keep it off her face. And his touch is so gentle and reverential that this time, when Belinda excuses herself to retch into the sink, she throws up the entire contents of her stomach. Belinda gets dressed herself, tugging on a gown, though her hands shake so hard that Etienne has to help her with the fastenings. She follows behind Etienne and stares at her own face, lax where it rests against her husband's. Their husband's shoulder as he carries her down the stairs and out the back door. Is that what she looks like when she sleeps? They leave the bloody mattress as it is for the housemaid to find. We'll say you were with child, Etienne had said, not meeting her gaze. They won't ask questions if they believe you lost something. Etienne is right, as he tends to be. When Belinda retires inside, hours later, the silent vigil over the little upturned patch of dirt beneath her favorite tree becoming too much for her to bear. The housemaid, Miss Clark, is already waiting for her, wringing her hands in the hallway. All it takes is just enough performance of Belinda's averted eyes and a hand pressed to her stomach for Miss Clark's face to drop. She coos sympathetically, fussing over Belinda so tenderly that Belinda is weeping before she can hold herself back. We buried her in the garden, Belinda croaks. All by yourselves, ma'am? Miss Clark asks, sounding surprised. We couldn't bear to leave her, Belinda says. And now she's telling the truth. Then she tells another. I don't know what happened. Belinda looks out from their bedchamber, trying to ignore the sharp smell of vinegar and lemon. The bed stripped of its linens behind her, the way the mattress has been flipped. She watches Etienne as the sky goes from blue to orange. Hours pass, and still he remains, bent over the grave of his dead wife, while his wife watches over him. After what feels like an eternity, he rises, stretching his arms. He turns, shielding his eyes against the setting sun, to look back up at the house. Belinda tries not to notice how he flinches when he spots her, feeling like a specter in the window. Dark paranoia. In a small studio apartment on the 4th floor, a cynical young man scratches indifferently at an early birthday present. The man's name is Aaron Newman, a man whom life treats without deference, honor, or success. Waiters bring him cold burgers, and gas station clerks shut doors in his face. On this day before his birthday, he is given a lottery scratch-off that will change not only the way he views the world, but everyone in it. Aaron scratched away at the lottery ticket, scoffing as he did so at the cheapness of such a thoughtless gift. But as the second box read 500,000 on, same as the first, he felt his pulse double and thrum with the intensity of an orchestra of bass. He told himself not to get his hopes up, as the disappointment would only sour after that last scratch. But he couldn't help himself. His palms and forehead began to sweat, and he was acutely aware of his eyes beginning to blur. When the third $500,000 revealed itself, Aaron flew from his seat only for his legs to tremble, forcing him back down to the chair. His face expanded into the appearance of a scream, yet no sound escaped him as his throat tightened. He blinked several times and rubbed his eyes as to confirm to himself that this was not an illusion. And the numbers on the small slip remained the same. Aaron had won the jackpot, and it was all thanks to this apathetic, lazy idea of a birthday present. He decided he wasn't going to cash it right away. He didn't want to give the gifter the satisfaction of knowing they had given him such an exuberant gift. Aaron knew that they would claim credit as if they somehow knew they were giving him a winning ticket, and would expect Aaron to share his money. No, that simply wouldn't do. He'd have to play it cool and act casual with his life, as if nothing happened. If the friend would ask about the ticket, he would say he won 20, which didn't feel like much of a lie to Aaron. Anyway, there was 500,000 after all. Aaron gave himself some time in his lonely apartment to collect himself and recenter his nerves. After several moments of balancing his breath and matting away the nervous sweats, he put on his shoes and left to go to the grocery store to have a personal celebration of his newfound, unsuspected success. Once in his car, Aaron drove down Main Street on his way to his town's small grocery store, the Piggly Wiggly, affectionately known as the Pig to locals. Realizing he's still jittery from his winnings, he sets his car on cruise control to keep a consistent, casual speed down the street. As he cruises, a black sedan rolls past a stop sign on his right and pulls in front of him, forcing Aaron to slam on his brakes. The car behind Aaron blares their horn angrily at them and swerves past him, continuing down the road as if this was all Aaron's fault. Aaron slams his fist on the horn as he glares at the black sedan. He can just make out a silhouette on the driver's side window. The shaded head appeared to be staring at him, though for what reason, Aaron could not say. "What the hell?" Aaron yells out at the dark car, which is idled halfway between two streets. Finally, it completed its turn and moderately accelerated down Main. Aaron muttered angrily under his breath as he moved on, eventually turning into the small parking lot of the Pig. The unfortunately meager lot was packed full of vehicles as Aaron weaved up and down the lanes. At last, he found an open space, and as he turned the wheel to park, a faded blue truck rushed in, nearly scraping Aaron's front bumper as it did so. Aaron laid his palm against the horn, blaring his siren. Heads of pedestrians, walking amongst the cars, swiveled to glower at him, and the driver of the blue truck scowled at him as they raised their middle finger. Aaron's lower lip trembled, and his eyebrow twitched. He eventually gave up and parked along the curb at the front of the store. He saw others do it all the time, and figured just this once he would too. What's the worst that can happen? Now in the store, Aaron goes to the refrigerated meat section. He knows on most days he wouldn't even dream of buying himself a steak, as he could barely live on the salary he made. But the money he had set aside for rent was chump change compared to what's going to be hitting his bank later. Now was the time to splurge. He picks up a decently sized New York strip, then moves towards the beer. As he moved down the aisles among the other shoppers, Aaron noticed that several of them seemed to be looking at him with disdain out of the corner of their eyes. He saw a mother place her hand on the shoulders of her kid, quickly turning them away. Aaron wondered if he had something on his face and offhandedly rubbed at his cheeks. Once in the alcohol section, Aaron inspected the beer selection. At first, he wondered if such an occasion would call for wine, but he didn't really care for the stuff. He settled on a 12 case of Blue Moon. He didn't know if he was going to drink all of them in one night, but wouldn't fault himself if he did. At the checkout, the cashier was loudly and sloppily chewing her gum. She never looked Aaron in the eyes, though did come close when she looked at his nose when she told him his total charge. Aaron couldn't say for sure why, but he felt like this cashier was harshly judging him in her mind. Let her judge. Aaron knew better. Aaron made it back to his apartment with little complication. The steak was overcooked, but the beers, all 12 of them, hit the spot nicely. He had music blasting as he danced awkwardly alone in the studio. With a break in the music, Aaron thought he heard something bang. He paused the music and stood, swaying, as he listened intently for sound. Bang! It was the window. Aaron rushed to the window, threw open the curtains, and looked outside to see two kids running across the parking lot in the dark, away from him. "You dipshits!" Aaron yelled. "Come try that again, and see what happens." He moved to slam the window shut, and after blinking several times, he realized he never opened it in the first place. Now, with the mood killed, he slumped down on his couch with an aggravated sigh as he sat in desolate silence. Now he thought he could hear whispering, which sounded like they were being spoken just out of view of the corner of his eye. His head swiveled from side to side, yet he saw no one. Though no one could be seen, the whispers and hushed voices continued. They were malevolent, invasive, and bitter. He heard them snicker, as if they were sharing secrets that he wasn't allowed in on. He paced around his apartment room, looking under the couch and behind furniture, even going so far as to lift the pillows on his couch, but could not find the whisperers. An unsettling feeling rose in Aaron's stomach, and he knew it wasn't just the beer. He was reminded of all the rude, hateful people from earlier today. The people who, if they weren't casting malignant glowers, seemed as if they wanted to get him hurt or killed. That's when it hit him. They know. He doesn't know who they are or how they found out, but they know about his uncashed lottery ticket, and they're out to get his money. Fervently, he spun around, brushing off the aggressive quake to his head as he did so, and charged at the small coffee table in front of the couch where he left the scratch-off. He swiped it up and held it, clutched it against his chest. His pallid, sweaty face peered over his shoulder. The whispers were growing louder. No, closer, as he shielded his treasure. He slowly backed away from the table until he broke into a sprint across the room and into the closet. He slammed the door and collapsed on the floor. There he sat for the rest of the night, until after an unknowable amount of time had passed, and he finally fell asleep. The next day, his birthday, Aaron's head felt like it was being pounded in with a hammer, wrapped up by thin lemon slices. He stood up from his corner in the closet with an aching back and walked into the main room of his apartment. He looked at his phone and had somehow slept until almost noon, and felt grateful he didn't have to go to work that day. He moved to the kitchen, and with trembling hands, he poured himself a glass of water and gulped it down. He refilled and did this 2 more times before shoving his face in his hands. He usually doesn't remember nights of heavy drinking, but he can recall last night clear as a bell. He knows that people are out to hurt him, possibly even kill him, to get their hands on his money. So he decides he is going to cash in this ticket ASAP and secure his money in the bank. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, he hastily puts on his crumbling sneakers, allowing himself to reverie on the classy new shoes he'll replace these with. He shoved the ticket in his pocket and rushed out the door towards the stairs, neglecting to even lock his door on the way out. Driving down his street, he noticed two girls standing on the sidewalk, and he noticed them cover their mouths and laugh. And he swears he saw their eyes dart over at his old car. He scowled at them as he drove past. Further down the road, there was a fallen tree that blocked most of his lane. He didn't see anyone from the other direction, but in light of everything, he had started to get nervous. With sweaty palms, he turns the wheel to move around the fallen tree. No one jumped out to meet him with this inconvenience, but he could see the verdure around him, rustling with ambushers, waiting for the exact right moment. With the stirring vegetation around him, the violent chorus of whispers around him began again. They were louder and somewhat clearer than before. He can make out some of their plans to string him up, beating him senseless. The phrase, "catch him, kill him," echoing in his ears. His eyes are blurring as dime-sized droplets of sweat rush down his forehead and flood his eyes. His hands have gone far from clammy, as now he struggles to maintain a grip on the steering wheel. He uses his forearm to wipe away his eyes, only in time to see a shadow standing in the middle of the road. He screams as he swerves, driving off the side of the road and crashing into a tree. He awoke, unsure of how much time had passed, but saw that the sun had already started to drop. He blinks and squints as the sensation of something cooling slowly runs down the side of his face. He reaches up to touch it, and his hand comes back red. Stumbling out of the car, he hears a woman call out, "He's awake! He's getting out of the car." Aaron turns his head to see a woman and a man standing next to their vehicle, parked on the side of the road. He looks to the tinted back windows and sees more of the shadowy figures, their heads turned to look at him. He gasps and looks back to the woman who cried out. Both she and the man carry twisted expressions of tentative eagerness. He knows they believe their time has come to take him, but he'd sooner go on his own terms before he lets them. He runs back in the direction of home, tearing down the street, light-headed as he was, unsure of how much blood he'd already lost. He knew he just only had to get back home, and he'd be safe. He didn't see those two girls with their mischievous giggles from earlier, but he knew that they couldn't be far. There are several pairs of running footsteps behind him. He can sense them, though he cannot hear them through the tremendous pounding of his hard-pressed heart. The whispers are shouting now, eager and hungry, their hands reaching towards him with greedy claws. He reached his apartment building and dove into the elevator. He slams his fist onto the button for the 4th floor. As the lift slowly rose, the lights flickered and the walls rattled. Aaron raised his hands and clutched his head as the bitter pounding of his attackers assailed the outside of the elevator. The elevator doors open, and Aaron knows that as soon as he steps over the breach between the lift and the apartment floor, a hand should shoot up and grasp his ankle, keeping him immobile until the doors close and crush him. He jumps over it and runs down the hallway until he sees his apartment. Room's door is left ajar, barely an inch, but open nonetheless. Aaron stood paralyzed. Horror tingled up his body like thousands of avid insects. He knows he has to make a choice. Wait for them to reach him out here, or face them off in there. He likes his chances in there better, if only slightly. He runs into the dark room and slams the door behind him. Immediately, he sees the shadows huddled against the walls. They begin their devious whispering. "Here he is," they say. "Get ready." He can't take it. He thought he could, but he can't take it. Not anymore, and never again. With tears streaming down his face, Aaron cries out, "You'll never take me!" With a blood-curdling scream, he begins to run again. The lights turn on. The trap is about to be sprung, and Aaron Newman jumps at the window and plunges 4 stories down to the concrete below. Emma Newman, mother of Aaron Newton, shrieks. Friends and family, who had been hiding in the dark to surprise Aaron on his birthday, all crowd around the shattered window and look down. No one would ever be able to understand what spurred on this paranoia that led to Aaron's death, as all that was found on his person would be his wallet, his old crumbling sneakers, and a fake lottery ticket given as a gag. But that is perhaps the worst part of paranoia. The unknowing, a dark paranoia. The mind's twisted masterpiece, where shadows dance and conspiracies unite to throw a party that only the troubled can attend. Mariner of Innsmouth. I write this now from a hospital bed not far from my hometown. Though I am labeled delirious and force-fed medications, whose names I cannot pronounce, do not believe that this testament is anything other than truth. It was 2 days ago, several miles away from the outer shelf reefs from the coast, when I was aboard a sailboat that drifted seemingly aimlessly over the waves. As the setting sun reflected its vibrant hue on the lapping crests, I, the schooner's sole passenger, leaned against a railing as I stared out across the waters. My name is Howard Phillips, and I was out on this solo sailing journey to find a new clarity in life. 3 days before was my father's funeral. My relationship with my father was a perplexing one. I looked up to and admired the man, but felt like I never really knew him too well. I found myself wondering about the conversations that would never be had, the beers never drank together, the lessons and the stories that would never be taught or told. After the funeral, I had expected to feel some clarity and peace, but instead found only distraught and confusion. And I now often wonder about my own life and where it could lead. I was left this small sailboat in the Will, and I found it a sign of what to do next, and without a second thought, put everything else on hold, loaded up the boat, and sailed off into the unknown with the belief that I myself could be known. Now, with the currents pulling me ever outward from land, I treated this as an autopilot for the craft as I stared in a yearning way into the waters below. I watched as I saw a small school of fish swim by. Though I could not identify their breed, I mused at the occasional scaled adventurer who would jump from the water away from their brethren as they tasted the open air and observed a whole new, alien world. I admired these displays and began to wonder if this was some metaphor from the universe I was meant to see, some natural guidance on my own mission for self-discovery. As I watched the fish surface to dance above the cresting waves, I felt I caught a glimpse of something further ahead in the water. It seemed like 2 orbs of crimson, as if 2 eyes were staring at me from below. But when I scanned the waters to better see these supposed eyes, they were nowhere to be found. I supposed whatever bigger fish they belonged to had swum away. Or, more practically, it was a trick of the light of the setting sun. As it distortedly emulated back to me, I shrugged away from the shimmering vision and turned to face the mast. As I did so, I saw a large onyx storm cloud approaching fast in the distance. I rushed to the wheel, yet was too late as the rushing gales moved at a seemingly supernatural speed, enclosing on and whirling the small boat in all directions as my vessel lurched aggressively to and fro. My only option was to cling to the railing for fear of losing myself to the now crushing waves which hurled against the sides of the sailboat like slapping tentacles of a great kraken. The schooner broached and was nearly knocked down. As I was raised into the air, I looked down at the opposite end of the boat and saw that the mast was nearly parallel to the water. I then peered into what I believed to be the murky depths below, except that with a flash of thunder, there appeared to be land not far below me. With that quick blaze of light, I witnessed an unending plain of putrid mud, a mast with the carcasses of decaying fish and horridly foul, less describable things protruding from the sludge. I thought I would feel relief by knowing there was land not far below should I capsize. But instead, an even stronger fear gripped me. A primal fear that whispered in my heart of the unknown horrors hidden beneath the waves. As the unknown, lurking darkness between the spaces of rot and decay beckoned for I to join it in eternity. I witnessed and experienced all of this and more in that split second in the boat's rocking, in that short burst of illumination. But now the ship had leveled out and rode the waves on the merciless winds, whose howls in my ears sounded more like mournful ghosts of all the lost sailors who fell to their watery graves in all the histories of man who came before me. On the horizon, I saw once again those dark crimson orbs from before, though now they rose from the waves instead of hiding beneath them, with churning waters to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters. Those soulless eyes sat as two windows of malice against the face of a towering loathsomeness as it rose to face me. Two monstrous, scaly arms rose to cast in my direction. I turned my face and cowered in a squat huddle against my forlorn vessel, unable to hold my gaze upon the Goliath for fear of losing hold of my sanity. With my eyes squeezed shut and my whole self trembling, I prayed for release from the Leviathan's wake. The sailboat lurched again, this time with such force that I was knocked into the air and hurtled into the water. I felt the unsettling sensation of the sludged mire below, the masses of decay and putrid remains pouring over and surrounding me as I sunk deeper into the concoction of fetid slime and rotted scales which cut deep in my skin. I felt it seep into my nostrils and under my eyelids, and the groping carcasses felt like an incalculable sum of vengeful hands gripping me, pulling me deeper and deeper still into my shallow grave. My consciousness faded, and all went into nothingness around me. That's when I awoke next in a hospital near the coast. I don't know how I escaped, or what became of my father's boat. I only know I was found washed ashore, bruised and littered with abrasions. But I was alive. As I lay on my hospital bed, with no company but the memory of that nightmarish storm, I realized I had found the clarity for which I had set sail, though it was a clarity I would wish on no one, and wish only that we all could remain in our blissful ignorance of the truth. The truth that, as men, our place in this world is that of mere playthings on a board of cosmic proportions for being far beyond mortal comprehension. That the storm that man finds themselves trapped within is at the whims of those who rise from the deep. Frayed Edges, Monday, 6:50 p.m. Sitting hunched over the scratched wooden surface of the desk in the corner of his room. Hideo Nakamura froze mid-brush stroke and stiffened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising up in response to the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he was being watched. He was home alone, had been for days. The house was deathly quiet, and the night was still. He'd been buried so deep in silent concentration while he practiced his kanji that he could have heard a moth flap its wings or a spider scuttle across the floor. Nobody, not a living, breathing soul, could have come down the hall, slid open his door, or entered his room without him noticing. Not a living, breathing soul. And yet, now he spun on his stool, expecting to find one, his breath caught in his throat as he came around and rose, arm up in readiness of defense. Calligraphy brush brandished like a weapon. Nobody was there, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave him. His room was small, just 8 tatami mats in size, and from where he stood to the wardrobe ahead was only a couple of paces. To his right, next to his desk, and flush against the wall, was a thin, uncomfortable mattress, which lay, without a base, flat on the floor. 3 of the bedroom walls, those to his left and right, and the one that held a curtained window behind him, were made of brick and plywood. The one ahead, which separated his room from the corridor, was a 2-panel traditional shoji, a latticework of bamboo in a wooden frame, covered with sheets of translucent paper. The outermost panel was on a track so it could slide, but it was closed now, the way he'd left it after entering the room. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, illuminating the room sufficiently. Apart from a few boxes full of textbooks and a rack on which sat some pairs of shoes, there was nothing in the room behind which anything that shouldn't have been there could have hidden. The only place any such thing could have been concealed was inside the wardrobe, which was built into the wall and sealed by another sliding door. It was this door that captured Hideo's attention. A second after he stood, or more specifically, it was the almond-shaped tear in the center-most paper panel, and the blackness beyond that his eyes came to rest on. The tear had been made a few days prior, when his feet got caught in the blankets as he hopped out of bed, causing him to stumble and plunge his thumb through the delicate paper. Ordinarily, this would have been a cause of concern for Hideo. But with his father away, there had been no need to panic. What his father didn't know couldn't turn him into that wrecking ball of rage Hideo had become all too familiar with since the passing of his mother. So it was a blessing he wasn't there to discover the damage. As minor as it was, it would have pushed him over the edge, the way every slight inconvenience seemed to these days. His father's unpredictability had been growing steadily these past months. Along with his dependency on alcohol, and Hideo could no longer anticipate when or where he might snap. They didn't speak much anymore, not even by text, and he had no idea how long this latest business trip might last. It might be days like the last one, or weeks like the one the time before. Whatever the case, he really did need to find time to repaper that shoji. For all he knew, his father could return that very evening, and that would mean trouble and bruises. If only he could fit it in around studying for his exams, practicing for the upcoming calligraphy contest his school had put him forward for, and training for the baseball league finals. All would be good, or at least as good as it could be. While walking on eggshells, an unexpected flicker of motion in the darkness behind the tear made Hideo jump, and he staggered, bumping into his seat and knocking it over. He didn't know what he'd seen, but he didn't hesitate in dropping his brush and snatching up the wooden stool in panic. Turning back towards the wardrobe, he half expected to find the door sliding open, or something hideous wriggling out through the hole. Instead, he found there was no longer darkness behind the tear, and he thought he could see the sleeve of his jacket. He creased his brow and took a step closer, squinting to peer through the hole. Yes, that was it. His white and blue baseball jacket, hanging where it always hung, in silence. And with that realization, he no longer felt he was being watched. Just my imagination, he thought, lowering the stool to the floor and catching his breath. Studying too hard, too much time alone in this empty house. Whatever he'd felt, whatever he'd thought, it was just a con of the senses. His mind playing tricks, telling him it was time to take a break. Deciding to do just that, Hideo picked up his brush, put it back on the desk, then made his way out of the room, heading down the hall to a lonely kitchen. Tuesday, 5:45 a.m., an hour before his phone alarm blared, he came alert, woken not by hunger pangs, nightmares about his father, or fears of being late for an exam, but by the horrible, goosebump-raising sensation of once again being intensely watched. In the dark, he fumbled on the floor for his phone, snatched it up when he found it, and jabbed it out into the room. The screen lit up with the press of a button, and he scanned it around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. His surroundings were illuminated only slightly, but it was enough for him to see that all looked normal. His door was shut, his curtains drawn, the light bulb dangled darkly. His desk, his stool, his boxes of books, and his shoes. Everything exactly as it should be. His hand stopped moving when the glow from his phone found the tear in the closed wardrobe. Shoji. There was a darkness beyond, that was darker than that of his room and seemed to throb. Panic seized his chest, and he jumped up, casting off his blankets and the textbooks he'd fallen asleep with, and stepping forward, free hand searching for a cord above his head, tugging it when he found it to ignite the bulb. "Is somebody there?" he asked, dropping his phone on the mattress and advancing in his shorts towards the wardrobe. "Don't be stupid," he thought. "Of course nobody's there. How could anyone be there? It's just the wardrobe." He was at the door in a second, reaching out with one hand, slipping his fingers around the edge of the panel's wooden frame to slide it open. The light from the bulb rushed in, proving at once what he already knew, that there was nothing to discover within except dangling clothes, the smell of mothballs, and towers of folded blankets on the floor. The darkness, if it had been there to begin with, was gone now. The door had been opened, and Hideo stared in bewilderment. The wardrobe was void of evil, peeping entities, and he no longer sensed any presence. "What is wrong with me?" he wondered, wiping sweat from his brow as he slid the door shut. "Why am I so on edge?" Telling himself it had to be exam stress, performance anxiety, exhaustion, looming deadlines, fear of his father, grief over the loss of his mother, or some kind of mind-warping, paranoia-inducing combination of it all. He slid the door shut and returned to his mattress, switching off the light as he passed beneath it and crawling under the blankets to get more sleep. Wednesday, 7:58 p.m. The second he entered the room, sweaty in his mud-stained baseball uniform, aluminium bat resting lightly on one shoulder, he could sense the presence watching him again. Stopped in his tracks in mid-yawn, he spun to glare at the tear in the brittle square of paper. His ceiling light was on, as he'd left it, and though earlier it had shone into the hole, allowing him a glimpse of the clothes within, all he could see there now was darkness. His face flushed as his eyes probed the black as pitch nothing, which seemed to be staring at him. His blood ran cold, his heart thumped loud, a lump stuck firmly in his throat. "Who's there?" he said, voice trembling, fully convinced now someone was hiding in the wardrobe. "Whoever you are, you better come out. I've a baseball bat, and I'll use it." Not a sound came back in response. Not a whisper. Not a giggle. Not a growl. If it was a ghost, or a demon, or something otherworldly, haunting him and spying from beyond, it didn't play its tricks to established rules. If it was human, or a thing of flesh and bone, it didn't care. A jot it had been rumbled. Maybe it was because he'd just come home from training, and his body was pumped full of adrenaline. Maybe it was because the baseball bat felt powerful in his hands. Maybe it was just that he was sick of being weak and quaking before others like a baby. Whatever it was, Hideo forced down the lump in his throat and strode to the door, slamming it back and stepping through, brandishing his weapon in both hands. As before, there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found, and nothing to be seen other than undisturbed clothes on metal hangers and neatly folded blankets on the floor. He jabbed his bat forward into his shirts, slid them aside, checked every inch of the back wall. There was nothing. There was no one. It was empty. "This doesn't make sense," Hideo said, lowering his bat. He was inside the wardrobe fully, in the space between threshold and clothes. He decided he should examine the torn paper panel from this side, in case there was something he was missing. So he took hold of the sliding door and pulled it shut. Almost at once, a chill seemed to descend, and he felt like he'd entered a vacuum. It could only have been his imagination again, brought on by the uneasiness of the moment. So he forced the notion from his mind and told himself it wasn't as cold as he thought. "Is it you?" he asked, craning his neck to examine the frayed edges of the tear. "Are you mad because I ripped you? Are you trying to drive me insane?" There was no logical thought behind his words. A shoji panel couldn't feel anger, nor did it have the ability to haunt or stare, regardless of how old it might have been. And old it was, which was clear from its brittleness and discoloration. Who knew how many people had slept in this room and used this wardrobe? Who knew what this door might have seen had it only had eyes? Logic didn't seem to factor into the current situation, so Hideo thought nothing of it when it occurred to him the tear did look like an eye, and he suddenly had the urge to peer out through it. Slowly, carefully, he moved his face closer and positioned himself right behind the hole. Squeezing one eye shut, he squinted to see out through it, only to be punched in the gut by the shock of seeing someone on his stool, hunched over his desk, apparently writing. Terrified, Hideo spat the air from his lungs and fell back, dropping to crouch amongst the blankets. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to process what he'd seen. What the hell was that? Starting to question his sanity, and clutching his bat in both hands, he straightened back up and returned his eye to the hole. He had to have been mistaken. He couldn't have seen what he thought. It was impossible as the fact it was now somehow dark inside the room. Someone had switched off the light. The person who'd been sitting on his stool? He couldn't see much, but he could tell right away that person was gone. He could make out shapes in the darkness, like the stool and the desk and the mattress lying flat against the wall. There was something else, too. A large mound on the bed. And just as he realized what that was, a light blessed into life. A rectangular light he knew came from a phone, He was frozen, captivated by what he saw, unable to look away. He watched the rectangle of light rise and bob around the room like a ghostly lantern. He knew, before it happened, the ceiling light was going to come on, like he knew who'd be beneath it when it did. "Is somebody there?" he saw himself ask, before jerking his head away and shuffling back, burying himself deep in shirts and jackets. "No, no, no, no!" he panicked, pressing himself back against the wall and clutching the bat to his chest. Eyes shut. He thought he heard the familiar swooshing sound of the shoji door opening. Impossible, he thought, squeezing his eyes so tightly shut he felt that they would burst. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be. Swoosh. Again. Then bang. And his eyes jerked open. Had the door opened and closed? Had someone peered inside? No. I'm imagining it. This can't be happening. It can't. The first time he'd felt like he was being watched, he'd been sitting at his desk drawing kanji. The second time he'd felt it, he'd been lying in bed, disturbed from a restless slumber. The third time had been just a few minutes before, when he'd entered his room and sensed the presence. And what had he done then, as completely immersed in this nightmare as he was? Hideo didn't believe the door would open again until it did. Nor did he believe a version of himself, a doppelganger, a demon, would step across the threshold and enter the wardrobe. But it did. It was dressed like him. It carried a baseball bat like him. It was dirty from sliding in mud like him. But it wasn't him, because he was there, shrinking back into the corner, watching it prod its bat into the clothes to sweep them aside. Steel hangers screeched along a tarnished metal rail, like witches shrieking, and the noise cut right to his core. Just a minute ago, he'd done the same thing, examining the back of the wardrobe and finding nothing. This one wouldn't come away so empty-handed. This one was going to find him. And with that thought, that fear, that panic-inducing, life-threatening realization, Hideo acted. The scream surged from the depths of his being, and he pushed himself up and lunged forward, swinging his bat as he did, striking the shocked-looking doppelganger square in the face and knocking it out of the wardrobe. He didn't stop. The adrenaline coursing through his veins was electrifying. It made his body burn and flooded him with rage. This was a fight for survival, a battle to retain his place in the world, to protect his identity. And he couldn't let this phony Hideo hurt him, and so he hit it as it fell to the floor, again and again on the head, pounding it into submission, pummeling it brutally until the feeble, desperate cries it made fell silent, and its spasming, copycat limbs lay deathly still. He stood over it then, panting, wheezing, sweat dripping off his brow, blood dripping off his bat. He stared at the demon's battered face, found he was unable to focus on it, didn't want to. Instead, he examined the blood splatter that decorated the tatami mats around it. The patterns looked like kanji characters, painted in thick, red ink. "Hideo, I'm home. Come say hello to your father." The shout that seemed to come from the kitchen at the bottom of the hall startled him, and he jerked his head to stare at the bedroom door. His father was home? Since when? He hadn't heard him enter. Had he been there all along? If so, what had he heard? And what would he say about the torn paper shoji, let alone the monster on the floor, wincing, afraid to see the mess he'd made, and the demon's caved-in face? He looked back down. There was nothing there. No doppelganger, no splatter, no kanji characters sketched in crimson blood. "Hideo, get your ass out here, boy!" Confused, panicked, Hideo caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shiny, polished surface of his bat, and shuddered when he didn't recognize it. It was his face. Of that, there was no doubt. But something was different. Something had changed. Something seemed missing from his eyes. That's when he noticed the bat wasn't covered in blood, but he knew that it could be. "I'm hungry, Hideo. Come and cook something. Don't make me go in and get you. There's no food in the house," he muttered, too quiet to be heard by anyone other than himself. "There's nothing in this house at all. Hideo!" He knew what it was now. Hideo! He knew what was missing from his eyes. Hideo! It was fear, and worry, and sorrow, grief, and loneliness, and hate. All of it gone, as if it had drained out of him, leaving just the one thing he had left: anger. "Coming!" he shouted back. Then he went out of his room to greet his father. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. Edgar Allan Poe.